Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by the creators of the new Players show premiering on Paramount Plus, all about League of Legends esports, Tony Yacinda and Dan Peralt, to talk about the process of going into all this and if they're actually just frauds that know nothing about League of Legends. Great to meet both of you. Really quickly before we dive into the meat of things, Tony, you're in a hotel room somewhere. What are you on tour? What's happening for you right now?
I am shooting a Sprite commercial in Atlanta with with Trey Young and Anthony Edwards. So I'm still in the world of sports.
Awesome. Okay. Well, fantastic to hear. How about you, Dan? This looks like your office, perhaps.
This is kind of the home office right here. This is the place from which, I participated in the writing of Players, West Hollywood specifically.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just from the home office.
So you guys, it's a couple days out from this thing launching, and you guys are not on some whirlwind tour, not in Asia or Europe or South America somewhere. It's not. It's a very quiet couple of days, I guess, for you guys before the launch of this thing.
Yeah, the calm before the storm. I guess it's exciting and nerve-wracking because Dan and I love this show so much.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, and the embargo is up to tomorrow, so we will know very soon how people respond. But we've all but done our jobs to make the show that we wanted to make, so we'll just have to see how others respond.
Well, I've seen the first 3 episodes. I was at the Riot sort of showcase of the first 3. I really enjoyed it, and it's been fun getting to see how this thing has come about. And so I'd love to, for those who don't know the origin or your guys' backgrounds, kind of get into that. So Tony, maybe you can kick us off with a little bit of just understanding of where you guys come from, what you guys have done before, and what you guys have made.
Yeah, how we got here. Well, Dan and I, we've been working together since film school. So that was like 2007. And we always had a shared sense of humor. Like we would laugh at a lot of the same stuff, but we also had this shared love of documentaries. And that is what led us to our first show. It was called American Vandal. It was on Netflix. And it was a take on like true crime docuseries, like Making a Murderer and The Jinx, but instead of following a case of, a murder trial, we're following the fictional case of a kid who's expelled for spray painting dicks on his teacher's cars, a crime he may not have committed. So basically, premise of the show was who drew the dicks. But we took it very seriously. And internally, as we were making that show, Dan and I had 2 big goals. The first had to do with realism. It was very important for us that this didn't just feel like a TV mockumentary, but it felt like a actual documentary that we loved. And the benchmark for success when it came to realism, we would say, was like, if you're watching the show and your roommate comes in and with no context, it would take him like 5 to 10 minutes to realize that, you're not watching a real documentary. This is satire. This is basically a dick joke. And that was goal 1. And the other one was more challenging. It's like kind of this silly premise, but the goal was like, can we get a general audience, can we get our parents to really invest in like this mystery? And that was something that we are proud to say that we mostly did. I don't know if Dan's mom likes it, but other than that, like I think we're 3 for 4 on our parents investing in the mystery of the show. So, but even as we were making that first show, Vandal, Dan and I were like, how could we do this with sports? Because the sports documentary that's our favorite documentary subgenre. Those stories of triumph and ambition and the search for excellence. And it was Dan who was like, well, what if we took the sports documentary like Cheer or F1 Drive to Survive, and then the wonderful Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary, What if we took that treatment to the world of pro gaming?
Okay, so then you guys decided pro gaming. So first off, how did you guys get the inkling of pro gaming even being a thing, and what were the kind of those early explorations as you were trying to figure out what it was? And I don't know, Dan, if you want to break that part down for us.
Well, I certainly had an awareness of esports, but not much beyond just the sort of general public awareness, which I think is, most people our age are aware of the size and the scale of it without knowing too much beyond that. But Tony and I found ourselves at the Game Awards, and I want to say that was 2018. I met another friend there who mentioned like, oh, hey, Riot is having their LCS, their All-Star event for all their League esports players and streamers, and that was going to take place in Vegas the next night. And so I said, yeah, I got nothing going on. My other show just got canceled. Why not go to this awesome League event? And I think that was where, because from a very early point, we were fascinated by esports. And as Tony said, we're fascinated by sports docs, and we saw something there. But it wasn't about League specifically. And I think that weekend really compelled me to, convince us that like, hey, this right here, it's a league that it's the biggest esport. First of all, of course, that's one matter that one factor, but also like we saw a lot of things that resembled traditional sports. Like the broadcasts have a sort of ESPN-like vibe to them. Even, structurally within the game, it's a 5v5 that, maybe if you're a fan of basketball, you can identify with the different roles in these matchups. And so I think that's when we started to really focus on it as a league show. And then I started going to as many events as I could, including the one in which I met you originally in St. Louis, where you and Broden were so nice to talk to me. And you and the casters and all of them, like I just did a bunch of random interviews. And I think there was a degree of confusion to like, who is this guy? Some people had seen Vandal, so that helped. But everyone was super kind and lending their time to me and answering all my random questions.
Well, you have some pictures that I was able to get that I had seen you shared at the thing of you at the All-Star event. So maybe, what was that experience like for you as your very first esports event? One, All-Star's very different from everything else, right? Much smaller setting, way closer, kind of everybody's having a good time. But, I mean, what were you up to at these events when you went to them?
I was just kind of sitting there and watching and absorbing it all. What's funny is that, like, as I'm thinking about how the night began, the first league personality I met was Tyler One. And that was my first, I had never seen him in a stream or in any clips. And so that's an interesting first personality to meet. And so I think because of just availability early in the evening, I met more of the streamers than I did the pros. So that it was a cool first event because literally everyone's there. You're there, casters are there, pros there, former pros, all sorts of personalities. So it was a nice way to like just get the full scope of it within one weekend. But in terms of like what was going on the screen, I was really struggling at first. I'm like, okay, I'm really trying to get this. And it took a lot of instruction to first like really grasp what was happening.
You went up and took a bunch of pictures with people as well. What was the inspiration for that? I mean, it seemed like you were kind of sneaking around, pretending you were like a longtime fan of the sport.
Yeah, there might have been a little fibbery going on there, but so to relate it back to Vandal for a second, like Tony and I probably only have a career because American Vandal is a very pitchable show. It is a show about graffiti penises. That is such an easy visual to sell people on, or to at least like make people get a cheap laugh from, that I knew we had to have some kind of visual with which to pitch our show. And so one thing I thought would be nice is like to talk about our experiences meeting everybody. And so I'm like, well, I should at least take a picture of everyone I'm with. And it did weird some people out, but I think now I have this amazing collection of every caster with and I'm holding a temper there as I do it too. So like it's definitely weirded some people out, but I think like, we got a show, so I don't regret.
Yeah. Now it's a moment in history. Those are historical items, those pictures.
Yeah. Okay, so Tony, then you guys have to figure out how to get Riot on board. I don't know, at one point in time you started trying to talk to them about all this, but I assume that was probably an interesting experience, because I know Riot from all these years. They are very protective, and they don't want anyone to ever think that they're like, they don't want anybody making fun of their stuff. They want everything to be very serious and whatever. So I don't know if they were suspicious. What was the process like in trying to get Riot on board?
Well, there was a process. I think there was a period between like Dan going to all of these events and doing this, all of this initial research on an esports show that we're talking about, where he was more into it than I was, even, like, because my thing was like, I'm watching the game and it's just like so hard to follow these images on the screen. Like, how could you get a general audience to like invest in this sport that just looks like a collection of colorful images? But we go to Riot and we're talking to Riv and Pastry Time and Aaliyah Sanati, who ended up being in the writers' room with us. And they were talking about like the support in the ADC position. And I know, like, it seems so obvious that there's going to be positions like that, but the way in which they were telling stories about like, oh, but if you have an ADC and a support who hate each other, like that's really that's when you can have real trouble with your team. And the way they're talking about it, like, oh, we're overthinking this. I don't need, like, this is a classic sports story. And I could get, like, without dumbing it down, we could show the real thing. We could keep the sport as real as possible. But if you could tell that, like, one character is reacting emotionally to a certain move in the game or a certain beat, and like the audience will be able to follow along. Like, this is a traditional sports show. But to do that, like, we couldn't create a game. We couldn't, there was some period where we're like, okay, well, we could do it and maybe ask them for licensing after, or I'm like, no, we need this show is not worth making if we can't do it the real way. And if Riot says no, Dan and I will go on our way and we'll try to make something else. And so that was the thing where we went in, and to Riot's credit, I don't think we like really pandered to them all too much. Like, we just basically made the show that we wanted to make, which was this, we call it a love story between a support and an ADC. And I think they were able to see how, like, we were using what we love about traditional sports documentaries to tell a story of this team. And I think, like, we were lucky to have some people at Riot who were fans of our first show and loved the attention to detail we had in our pitch. And I think the consensus there was that, like, yeah, this could be, for us, the goal is that this could be kind of the Rosetta Stone for fans of esports who, like, they can show this show to their parents, and the parents will be like, I still don't get really what's going on in the game, but I understand, like, why it's so exciting, why the competition, the level of competition is just so impressive. So I think, like, Riot saw value there.
Dan, one of the things that is fascinating to me after seeing the first 3 episodes is everything that I have ever seen or been a part of, some other really cool documentaries or looks at the space or whatever, they have done a really good job of, like, really trying to showcase sort of the glory of the sport. And, even if every now and then they're like, haha, like, this is a funny moment with these players or whatever, they're real people, they don't ever dive into how goofy everything is. And especially, like, way back in the day, like, and I say way back in the day, we're really talking about like 6 years ago or something, where you had all these dudes just like living in an apartment or whatever, But your show is the first, I feel like, that really, from an outside angle, captures just how ridiculous everybody is, the inanity of the pro player names, and the way that they have come up with these things, usually from some sort of sexual reference. And so, how did you guys go about that? What were you guys watching to kind of capture that, and to move past sort of what nowadays I sometimes think is like a almost an overly polished look at all this stuff as everything's become more professional, etc.
Well, I think one thing comedy-wise, Tony and I look for when we do our mockumentaries is like, is there something in the subject matter that initially feels funny, that there's something different about it, and can we use that in a way that when you apply super serious documentary approach to that makes it funnier? You know, with Vandal, it's very kind of easy to make a dick joke funny if you take it as seriously as we did. And we saw this opportunity in this sport that had players with funny names, things like the Victory Broccoli. Even the thing that you mentioned, the fact that like ancient history in esports can include something from 2015. That was all kind of funny to us as traditional sports fans. And so we saw something there comedically, but we also saw an opportunity to tell a compelling story that people would become more invested in than they were expecting to when they first learned about the names, when they first learned about the sort of oddities of the world. I don't think you anticipate that you'd actually become invested in a team of mostly, 22-year-old guys with names like Licorice and Fudge, or in our case, Cream Cheese, Big Ol' Bucket of Water, and Organism. But our goal is that by the end of our show, by our finale, you are not laughing at a single one of these sort of unfamiliar elements. You're genuinely rooting for a team that you've become invested in over the course of the 10 episodes.
I think that was always super important for us, that like, as much as we can have fun with what's silly about this alternate gamer universe, the stakes have to be, whether you're into gaming or not into gaming, we need you to want Fugitive Gaming to win for this show to be successful. And I think on some level, like if we were making a show that was an inside look at a NBA team, we would also want to strip some of the polish. Like if you look at the stuff that NBA will, the little featurettes they make about their players, they're super polished and aspirational in a way that's probably a little inauthentic as well. And if we were doing the mockumentary show, we would put some confident idiots in and have fun with what's funny about the world of NBA as well. And I mean, it's just like, it's incredible that Riot Riot was okay to have a sense of humor in a way that I don't know if an older league like the NFL would allow somebody to make a mockumentary, a low budget mockumentary comedy about their sport, but they saw value in it, and we're so grateful for that.
What did you guys watch to learn, especially about the early days of this? Because again, there's all this polished stuff out there, but you guys mentioned at the show there was at least one thing that I thought was very funny that you guys started with, or especially the players or the cast members they were starting with.
Well, you're talking about Breaking Point?
Yes, yes.
We also had Keen Lamb in the in our writers' room, and Hai came in and talked about how he started like Cloud9, and that experience, like he's just such a nice guy and so humble about creating this organization that's now worth, like, what Forbes said it's worth, like $400 million or something insane. Who knows what those numbers mean, but like it's just these kids who were really good at video games that created these it's the American dream in such a cool way. You're like, we're talking to Hai Lam, and he's like such a part of history, and he's so unassuming about it, and like, this needs to be in the TV show. I think that was the even bigger part of inspiration. Obviously, you can point to characters at the show, and you're like, there might be obvious comparisons of like to Dardoch and Cream Cheese, or Double Lift and Cream Cheese. Misha studied so many different gamers and watched so many streams. He really did the homework, and I think you can feel it there. But yeah, I don't know. That conversation with Hai is one that really stuck to stuck with me.
And when you
everybody
say
else in the
Misha, you mean Misha, the actor who plays Cream Cheese, one of the protagonists in the show.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you guys then had sort of the framework. You knew you wanted to go do this. How did you go about casting the show and shooting the show? Because obviously we've been in a pandemic, so I'm sure that's kind of slowed things down. You're trying to really capture esports in different ways. Obviously, Riot has some footage that I'm sure you guys were able to splice in. So how did you go from sort of the concept and knowing what you wanted to then actually creating and crafting this?
Well, I mean, casting, we wanted to cast a very wide net. We also knew a huge part of it from the beginning was to incorporate real people from the league community, yourself included. Minor spoiler alert, I suppose there, but like I think it's no surprise that you're going to see a lot of familiar faces, whether it be casters, streamers, former pros in this world, and some of those former pros play lead roles in the show. I mean, it is impossible. Tony and I do not claim to be experts in League, and you frankly can't be without putting in countless hours over the course of years to really reach that level. So I think we knew that any version of cramming to study the game and the scene in time to shoot this and feel like a lived-in expert was a fantasy. And so we in addition to casting our lead roles with seasoned actors, we also went out to former pros and some current pros and saw like who would be. We're not looking for major acting experience. We're looking for someone who can talk fluently about the game within our fictional circumstances. And we were absolutely thrilled with people like Arrow and Youngbin, who, feel very real and honestly were also hilarious. And so we knew from an early point on, it wasn't just about casting the best, I suppose, professional actors, but also people who are really feel like a core part and just feel very authentic.
And it wasn't even like, a lot of times you see shows like this and they'll go like, the cameos feel like cameos and they're like, oh, it's cool that they got, but for us it wasn't really the novelty of having the prominent people in the show as much as it was like nobody is going to do a better job of casting than Azale and Flowers, or we got they do such an incredible job and nobody can approximate that. Same with like some of the like Arrow and Youngbin and Miko. They have such great performances, but they're very subtle and they're kind of as comfortable in front of the camera as a real pro gamer is. But then they're also they'll be next to Misha, who's playing Creatures, and it'll be like, oh no, move your mouse. Like I remember Arrow going like, do like the ABCs with your mouse. That way it feels more deliberate and you're just not like moving it back and forth. And like those little tips from the gamers as we're talking to the writers backstage, and we have like Jat and Keen going through the scripts talking about like, okay, but he wouldn't say that, so you got to shoot another version. And we knew we couldn't just have like the resident League of Legends expert. It had to be complete, surround sound. We had to be just completely immersed with, a half a dozen people at any given point who had like an encyclopedic knowledge of the sport.
How did you guys? There's a bit of a joke or meme in the community around. Every time you see a video where pro players have had to act, or even a lot of the casters or folks, myself included, the top line or top comment is usually porn level acting. And so how did you guys go about doing this? Because it's fascinating to me. People would not have thought usually like, oh, who you should get is like Arrow and Youngbin, who I love, but also like they're just not, in general, and all of us in this space, none of us are used to acting. We're usually very like awkward nerds who are, you try to put us in front of a camera. We're trying to figure out how to do anything. So how were you guys able to make this work? Because based off of what I've seen the first 3 episodes, all of it feels as if everybody was selling it perfectly,
Yeah, I mean, I think not giving them too much parameter, like we're not giving them classically trained like monologues that you would want to go to film school and study method acting to be able to execute. We're just getting the cameras out. All right, we're keeping it loose, guys. We're in the bus after you're on a 3-game losing streak, and I just want I want Bucket and Bop, Arrow and Miko just like yelling about a top laner, mid laner argument, and Nightfall, the jungler. You're like playing Peacemaker, and they're like, got it. And they're just going and they're just like role playing and having a conversation in a way that like we could never write that. I don't think they could, if we did write it, even if gamers wrote it and then they were trying to perform it, it would seem stilted. But because it was just like really loose, and then we would be like, Bop or Arrow, how do you feel about them selecting Heimerdinger? And he would have his real reaction to his ADC going rogue and picking Heimerdinger. So I think we're playing to their strengths. We're not trying to turn gamers into actors. We're trying to capture what is so dynamic and unique about real gamers.
Yeah. Dan, were there any changes that were made in the writing room besides little tweaks here and there to language, or were there any conversations where you were talking to some of the Riot writers or the casters or any of the players where you're like, oh, okay, like we are actually going to shift this? And I know there's, we were trying to avoid spoilers, but I'm kind of curious what impact everybody had on how the show flowed and how things went down.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, Keen Lamb and Elias Anati were writer producers they were there every step of the way in the writer's room. They also helped craft, Elias we met at a very early point, and he helped craft some of the initial story points that we brought to Riot. So those 2 guys were super influential in coming up with story points. And then, one thing that would happen often is Tony, myself, or one of the writers will come up with, I would say, like a traditional sports equivalent. And then Keen and Elias would translate that into what is the league version of that? What's the league version of, a come from behind sort of last minute victory? What's the league equivalent of the down and out veteran making one last attempt at a career? And they would find great ways to sort of find the version of that makes sense within the world of LCS. Jat also was a consultant from, I think, the end of the writer's room right through production. And so he would often point out things that could be improved. And then Riot as a company, like there were so many great executives at Riot who would constantly give very helpful notes and feedback. And we were very actively speaking with them the whole time. So there was definitely stuff. Again, Tony and I don't claim to be able to say, no, this Baron Steel is exactly how it's like, there's nothing that we wrote that is wrong. Like, we know that we're going to screw up. And so to have sort of that net to catch us and to also inform us of what we can do better was super helpful.
Yeah, it's it's good that we can. I feel like we are lucky that we're somewhat of outsiders, because I think it would have been really harmful if we had like a hubris that, I've been watching basketball since I was a kid, and maybe I would have a little bit more hubris that like I could write what a coach would really say. But the truth is, even though I've always watched basketball, I couldn't write. I don't know what a real NBA coach is saying in a huddle, but former players, former coaches, if they're on your writer's staff, if they're on set, they can tell you like, no, this is actually what they would say. And us kind of knowing what we didn't know is, I think, what allowed us to bring like. I'm so proud of like the authenticity and realism in this show. because we just had the perfect support system to
I
be able
mean,
to do that.
Tony, I feel like you guys are doing yourself a little bit of discredit, because whenever we were shooting my cameo or whatever, you were giving notes where you're like, oh yeah, so like maybe feel free to talk about how like you think that the split pushing strategy here is not right, or like they should have done like a lane swap, or like they really need to get like you were throwing out all these terms where I was like, holy shit, like so I assume along the way you guys picked up a ton of stuff. I'm curious how much of it you know what it links to, or versus how much of it is just like you're like, oh, this is a term that I've heard Jat say 5 times already or something, you know?
No, we talk about it like I can't speak it, but I understand it. So when we're like, we want Braxton to have like a real coaching win in this game. What's like a really out there strategy that would turn heads? And then they're like, a lane swap. I'm like, oh, I didn't know lane swaps were a thing. They're like, yeah, in old metas you would have, and they explain what the lane swap is, and then we would go and watch some clips of like games with lane swaps, and that's kind of it was such a fun way to learn about this world. But so yeah, I mean, I do feel like we've learned a tremendous amount about this world, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't still feel like so naked without without all the support we have.
How getting into the shooting of the show, how did you guys go about this? Because you guys need like arena shots. I mean, even in the trailer, you see a shot of Cream Cheese like standing on a stage. That feels very much like you were at a League of Legends event with everything behind. You know, it feels like you guys have just dropped into a time machine and gone back and placed these folks places. So, like, how did you guys go about this?
I mean, one important element was like, you know, we were able to get some version of the old client. The actual game itself. We were able to get, you know, logos and jerseys that would have been time accurate, because one thing that's a key component of the show is that we're watching 2 different timelines, or, you know, one technical timeline, but we're primarily focused on the present, which is the 2021 season, as well as the 2015-2016 sort of origin of the team. And so to get, you know, again, Riot really helped us to really get right the different elements and how they may have changed over the years. We were able to fill the LCS arena for a few days to get our fan shots. We shot in a larger arena at one point as well. And we were able to shoot a little bit at Houston for the actual LCS spring finals this year. And so, and that
also VFX and archive footage as well. Like we had all of the tools where, you know, well, maybe you'll see a clip of Cream Cheese at Worlds in one flashback, and it's just like a player cam that we're able to mock up of him in China, you know?
Yeah. I will say, though, like Houston, I really enjoyed, because you can't fake that specific enthusiasm. You know, if like, so literally what we did, the fans were super nice to us. We asked people if they'd be willing to wear a few fugitive jerseys, and they're reacting to the actual finals as if it's, you know, it may be one of our events at Worlds, or like, you know, the 20s. I don't want to get into spoilers, but there are moments in which Cream Cheese in his career has been in a bigger stage, and to be able to fake that, but not really fake it because the fans are real and their reactions are real, was very valuable to us.
Tony,
that was also such a good series too. Like that, the Danny Penta in game 1 was like, it's one of the best. I never really thought I would get to that level where I would like really value that as one of like the best like live sporting moments I've ever seen. And yeah, it genuinely was. I get goosebumps talking about it. It was so cool.
Tony, I was at Houston, and I came around a corner at one point in time because somebody was like, "Oh, you should go say hi to Tony. It's been a couple of years, etc." And I walked around, and there was just 2 dudes in like crazy body paint, and I'm like, "What are these guys doing on this level? They look like fans." And then you turn around, and you were one of the dudes covered in the body paint. So
Yeah.
I don't want to give spoilers, I guess, on what might be a cameo appearance from you, but it seemed like you were getting intimately involved in the event itself.
Oh yeah, it was so much fun watching that game. I mean, just to get a few shots with fugitive fans in the big arena just adds so much authenticity to those final moments. But really, you're like, okay, we get a few shots of us cheering, and then we just get to like watch the game. Um, both series were really fun. And yeah, but yeah, that's just a cameo appearance that nobody other than my mother, I think, will really care about. But I'm happy to be a part of it.
Do you guys have a favorite LCS team?
I feel so nervous to say I'm not, but I'm not going to say I like them all. I will say that we enjoyed, like, I feel like such a 5-year-old putting it this way, but I love Cloud9's like jersey and logos, and so like we became Cloud9. Also, I love Sneaky, and I met Sneaky at one of those early events, and so
Yeah,
I think like we had a soft spot for Cloud9.
and I was going into the writers' room. I was like, hey, I've always been forced to be a Philadelphia sports fan. Now I could pick whatever team. And we were going into the writers' room, which was like March of 2020. So I just looked at the power rankings. I'll be like, I'm going to be a front runner. I'm going to pick the team that is currently ranked first in the power rankings. So I picked Cloud9. Well, I will say, it all changed in Houston for me. I'm definitely Danny and JoJo. It's kind of related to our storyline a little bit, the young prodigy talent. It was cool following their world's run. Would have loved to see a win over G2, but they kind of held their own for I don't know. I'm excited about Evil Genius, so that's now my team for sure.
Uh, going kind of back to the research you guys did, was there anything you guys ever watched or saw or learned about the space where your minds were just kind of blown, where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened, or like this is in of itself such a crazy story, or I don't know if there was anything, because the funny situation for you guys is you guys are trying to make a mockumentary, but like esports is almost a mockumentary in and of itself, you know what I mean? And I know that there's goofy stuff that happens, as you guys mentioned, in traditional sports, but like I wonder if there were times where you guys were like, oh my god, we can't write something better than this, like this is ridiculous. I those early explorations, I'm just fascinated to hear what if there's anything that stood out.
I think the first thing that stood out is how truly big Worlds is, and we knew we wanted to incorporate, and I won't say in what way, but we knew we wanted to incorporate in some way into the show. And then second would be the trash talk. Like, first of all, there's more of it than I was expecting, and the degrees of success in that trash talk was funny to me. Like, I've seen. Like, if you search cringe trash talk, that's a good watch. But then there's like good trash talk, and so it's like, okay, this will be a part of the show.
But it is like, yeah, League trash talk is insane. Like, just a minor comment that like happens every day for League fans would be like all over Sports Center if like Kevin Durant called the other team trash the way that like any league, yeah, that was easy win. Like, that shit is just, it makes me laugh so much that they're like, there's so much more like almost soft spoken and nervous about it, but they're so much more savage than any other sport when it comes to press conferences. We love that.
Yeah, it's so funny that you guys say that, because there is like one of my, just to move into kind of a general discussion at this point in time, one of my like almost concerns for your guys' show, not for your show, but for the esport, is that there's been such conversation lately about how things have gotten so polished, or like pro players are afraid to trash talk like they used to. And I was sitting next to Mark Zimmerman watching the first 3 episodes, and one of the things we were talking about afterwards is like, oh god, like it was so, in some ways, even more entertaining or more wild back in the day, and your show made us so nostalgic for that. We're like, oh, we miss whenever you had these like really awkward interviews, or when I was conducting these really awkward interviews. It is in some ways too authentic in that it calls back to a time that was kind of like the Wild West, and I feel like so many people are going to get nostalgic for it. So, yeah, it was really funny for us watching that. We're like, oh man, are people just going to be like, we want more of this, you know? And in some ways, there are things that are happening in the show that are even more fascinating than are happening in the current LCS. And obviously, you guys have the benefit of being able to script out events and all that. But it's funny because they feel authentic still, right? Even if the stakes feel higher or whatever than what we're seeing these days, like all of this feels like it could have happened, you know, and in so many ways, Breaking Point it has a lot of those moments that you guys have in the show. It's just wild.
I really hope that a general audience does like can appreciate how real some of it is, and that they're not like, oh, but I bet they don't actually like they're not actually this candid in like post game interviews and stuff as they are. Like, no, this is how gamers would say this in a interview in 2015. I hope that that isn't lost on them.
And I will say, like, there was a day in the writers' room where, because originally we were always going to tell a story between the 2021 season and the 2015 early days, but we weren't going to tell a story about the actual origin of the franchise. And that was a big shift. Is kind of late in the writers' room. We had a great note from Paramount Plus that, you know, we could really use some more feeling of ownership or like grassroots to this all. And I think that's when we shifted to, why don't we tell not just an origin story of the players, but of the franchise, of the team itself. And I think that there is, even though, you know, we weren't fans at the time, there is something that's so charming, endearing about the grassroots. Everyone's playing out of an apartment in Van Nuys. You know, we had to print our own jerseys. We're eating, you know, ramen for most of our meals as we play deep late into the night. And we found that so fun and different, and also such a different texture from the 2021, as you said, more polished timeline, where you just see how far esports has come. But you're right, there's a totally different vibe to it just 6 years ago, that we felt, in the same sense that when you're watching the 1998 season and The Last Dance, everything feels so much, you know, polished than the early 80s when you see Jordan, you know, in his college dorm. And we wanted to get that sense in a much shorter period of time, 6 years. But thankfully, like, esports was still at that sort of infant, like early stages in 2015 that allowed us to play with it.
Yeah. Okay, well, wrapping this up, I want to give you guys a chance to sort of respond to one of the biggest things I've seen so far from people that have seen the trailer but not the show, which is, oh, are they just going to be making fun of us too much? Or like, how, you know, what is this? I'm sure you guys read a lot of the comments or sort of the reactions, especially from the community. So is there anything that you guys want to say to any of the especially the fans that will be watching from within the League of Legends esports community?
Well, obviously we understand the skepticism. Like, just historically, comedy about gamers thus far has not aged too well, and it hasn't been it just hasn't been the best representation. So it seems like it's logical to think that this could just be more of the same. Also, because we're not coming in pandering. We're not making an advertisement for Riot either, and like making a puff piece of like, hey, look at how, like, if you want to be cool, you should be a pro gamer. Like, that's not the show we are making either. But the truth is, this show does not work for anybody if you don't care about the stakes, if you don't really care about the sport and the meaning. Like, if an LCS title isn't meaningful to you and the characters, the show is not going to work. So to us, like, that is the thing. Like, even if we have some silly characters, like, to us, and we're making a lot of jokes, the actual love of the sport and the appreciation for like the competition, just by definition, cannot be a joke. Like, we need fans of esports and non-fans of esports to like really invest and root for Fugitive Gaming to win and LCS. So I hope once you see it with that context, and that's like kind of the engine of the show, some of that skepticism will dissipate, because you're like, oh, this is everything. This is what, like, at its core, this is what I love about esports, and now it's just in a fictional show with some funny characters.
Yeah. How about you, Dan? Anything you want to say to any of the League fans out there?
I mean, look, the stamp of approval from the League community means so much to us, and that is a huge part of why we had so many people from the community in front of the camera, behind the camera. You know, I don't want to jinx anything, but so far those people have been very happy with what we were able to do with their help. And then I'll also say that, you know, again, and I'm not gonna say any spoilers, but we've gotten good responses from League and non-League people alike on where the show ends up. And to me, the real litmus test is like, are you on the edge of your seat, rooting for this team, regardless of whether you know exactly the circumstances of the game? And, you know, so far we feel good about our limited responses at this point. We'll see tomorrow when the embargo is lifted, but we are truly making a show that, look, we want everyone to be able to enjoy, but certainly hope that the League community enjoys too. And also because they helped us so much, we hope that we return the favor.
Yeah. Where can people watch this, and when is it coming out?
Paramount Plus. The first 4 episodes are available on June 16th. That's a Thursday. And then after that, it becomes a weekly release. I believe the finale is sometime in late July. I also believe that there are some episodes you can see ahead of time, ahead of the paywall, which is great. And so, yeah, after Thursday, it's once a week, and then which I kind of like. I think we got a full summer of this show, which will be great if people like it. If people hate it, it'll be a terrible summer.
Very good. And I know there's some, as I've heard rumors as well, that there might be an episode or two that you can watch without having to subscribe. But also, I know there's a ton of 1-month trials that are floating out there that people can find. So I'm just hoping people sign up, even if they have to figure out a creative way to do it so that they can watch it.
Both of these are true. Yeah, I think there's going to be some also, like, hopefully some membership, month giveaway memberships, and then I think 2 episodes will be in front of the paywall.
My suggestion to everybody who's watching this interview right now and is thinking about pirating them is not to pirate them so that these guys can get all the views that they need. Just, if you don't want to pay, figure out the creative promotional method to watch without paying. Don't pirate, or find some restream site or something.
Yeah, we got to get a second season.
Dan and Tony, thank you so much for talking with me. I know you both have to run. I'm sure there's a Sprite commercial calling your name. Dan, you've got other stuff you got to do. So thanks, guys. Hopefully the show is well received, and we can do some more content with you guys. Maybe have you on Hotline League or something at the end. If it's not well received, this is the only time I'll ever be associated with you. So best of luck.
I got pictures with Travis. We're forever together because
I've never seen this man before in my life. Thanks, guys. See ya. As big as this screen is, it's nowhere near as cool as the Alienware 34-inch OLED monitor, available now at alienware.com/Travis. There's a link in the description below. You got to check this thing out. It's the first of its kind. It's getting rave reviews. Just look it up. It's amazing. Again, alienware.com/Travis. Link in the description. Thanks, Alienware, for sponsoring.